Hi, everyone. This is Keith Stone here again with our team. We have with us here today Greg.
Hi.
And Claudia, as usual. And also joining us are Sarah and Hélène. And we hope that their presence will be will continue in these office hours, at least on occasion.
So happy. I'm so happy that Sarah and Iliad are with us. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So we wanted to go back to the hour 8 discussion question because we noticed there was a lot more discussion happening there. And so we'll do that before we go on to hours 9 and 10, which is our focus for this week. And I was wondering, Sarah and Hélène, could you just briefly say what is going on in the hour 8 thread?
Yes, we're noticing that there's been a lot of discussion and not necessarily agreement. People have different perspectives. There's discussion about the importance and the affection. Is the importance based on affection or is it based on something else? So I wonder if you could maybe, Greg, help us think about that.
That's so much fun, and I should confess to everybody that in my youth I spent so much time on the beginning of the Odyssey that I almost forgot about the second half, and so I too linger a lot about how Odysseus is developing in many ways into a different kind of character than what we saw in the Iliad. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that he is simply different, but certainly the Odyssey and the preoccupations of the Odyssey about the need to make it back safely to Ithaca, that really does affect how we think about this character. It's destabilizing, and Hélène, you were saying to me at one point in our conversations that Odysseus seems to be, how shall I say it, surprisingly complex, he's just surprising. Am I getting that right? Is that what you pick up from the readers?
Right, one of the participants, yes. He's coming to realize that Odysseus, to him, looks different in the Odyssey than in the Iliad. And he's comparing both of them. He's even saying that the epithets are different.
In some cases, I think they really are. The Iliad certainly doesn't emphasize that Odysseus has an epic reputation of traveling many places and suffering a lot. There are some cases, so we can't say that the Iliad is completely innocent of the kind of Odysseus that is now developing, but certainly you're so right. And the respondents that you're mentioning who noticed that difference are also right, that there is definitely a difference. We're now seeing more clearly the many-sidedness of Odysseus. You mind if I tell everybody something that is very surprising and is not obvious? And it's something that was first discovered by our mutual friend Leonard Milner when he was looking at protocols for how Homeric poetry expresses formal speeches like prayers and boasts. And Lenny noticed that not so much in the Iliad, but in the Odyssey, Odysseus keeps messing up about protocols. He doesn't seem to follow the rules, even when it comes to table manners. And I can give one very good example. This is a little bit different from what Lenny was focusing on, but I think it will illustrate what he was getting at. I noticed that when he is the disguised Odysseus, nobody knows who he is, and he's a dinner guest. At one point, he simply takes a knife and starts carving the champion's portion of the meat that's about to be distributed among the guests. You say, wait a minute, he is the guest. Not only a guest, but a secret guest, an unidentified guest. He's not the host. What business does he have in in distributing the meat, but he does in Odyssey 8, for example. And here's another one, already in the Iliad. You remember in 9 when Phoenix nods at let's try that again. It's when Ajax nods to Phoenix, and okay, then that means that Phoenix should be the first speaker of the 3 speeches in the Iliad. And guess what? It's not Phoenix who speaks first, it's Odysseus who speaks first. Let me put it this way, he speaks out of turn. So what am I saying? That in general, he has a propensity to violate rules of, now Hélène, you can say it so much better in French, etiquette.
Etiquette, yes.
Protocols, and he just violates them, and that's something that in, for example, Native American cultures is typical of trickster figures. And that's a good word to think with. That you start seeing the trickster aspects of Odysseus more clearly in the Odyssey than in the Iliad, although there are traces already in the Iliad.
As we make this transition to the Odyssey, I wonder if we could talk about laments. And
yes.
that's the topic of the hour 8.
Oh yeah.
Those 3 laments at the end of the Iliad.
Yes.
But lament plays an important role in the Odyssey as well, in the same, Greg, that you were just mentioning at the dinner table.
Yes. You know, when sometimes people will say, oh, the epic of Homeric poetry is entertainment for men. I find that the older I get, the less and less and less useful generalization or an assumption. And if I can be subjective for a moment, I love to say, and you've heard me say it, some of you already, that if you try to quantify all the creativity in verbal art that goes into the Iliad and the Odyssey combined, I would estimate, this is just an estimation, that 60% of that verbal art comes from women's traditions, not from men's traditions. And of course, lament and love song in that order are the most important aspects of women's song-making traditions. And so there's a lot of sorrow, a lot of expressions of sorrow, a lot of expressions of identity by way of expressing sorrow that you have not only in the Iliad, but also in the Odyssey, is when Odysseus keeps breaking down and weeping when he hears the first song of the blind singer. Then again, when he hears the third song. That's very, very, very important. It's almost like a compatriot of Hélène would call it a signature. I'm thinking of Foucault and the way Foucault talks, the great thinker Foucault talks about signatures. It's a kind of hint at what's going on.
Greg, could I ask just about that question that you posed last week and the 3 laments? How do you see the direction of scale of affection going?
Yes,
up or down, or are they ordered on some other principle entirely? So
I think it goes. I personally think, but I'd love to hear what all of you think, that it goes top down. That the person who is the highest in Hector's ascending scale of affection is his wife. Then comes his mother, and then, oh yeah, there's the sister-in-law. I was nice to her, but I'm not crazy about her. That's the way I would second guess a living Hector's reaction to the ordering. So I think he would have approved that the wife goes first. The wife, I think, is at the top.
So, Greg, could I just ask a little bit about that then? We're envisaging this as Hector being the prime audience, if you like, for the lament.
Yes, beautiful.
But then also we, as audience participants, hearing this narrative, is our sense of the scale of importance or affection the same as Hector as target of the lament, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question. Is do we react the same way as the destinataire of the laments would have reacted? In other words, what about the general audience's reaction? So here's where it gets maybe even more interesting, is that after all, yeah, Andromache starts, then Hecuba or Hecabe, and then finally Helen. But what happens after that? Then everybody joins in, and it's described as the joining in by the demos. In other words, the entire community in the end is lamenting. So again, if I can second guess, in one way, sure, for Hector personally, wife first, mother second, sister-in-law third, and then community beyond that. But, and I'm so glad you brought that up, in terms of the community, who may not be as close to Hector as the other three in the order in which I said, the community then reacts the way we as an audience might react. So it's almost like a cue. And you know, I'm now having a big insecurity attack when I use the word signature. I can't remember whether it was Foucault or Derrida. So can we keep that in abeyance and we'll look it up later? I love it when things are sort of hanging in the balance and we don't have to solve everything. So whoever said signature was a smart person, but I'm not sure anymore.
Well, that might be a good time to move to the 9 and 10 questions.
Oh boy, oh boy. You know, I must say, one of my favorite discussion questions that I ever cooked up was the one about Noos and Nostos and where they come together, and whether the myth of the Lotus Eaters, which is one of the quickest myths that you'll ever experience, or the Song of the Sirens, whether the first one or the second one are easier to think with. And maybe that really stymied our participants, because I don't know, maybe your reaction, dear people out there, is that neither one of them is easy. And maybe the first one is easier for me because I've looked at it so long. But can I give a rationale for why I think it's easy? Is that all right with everybody? And then please agree, disagree, whatever. So, Land of the Lotus Eaters. Basically, if you eat this vegetable or plant, whatever it is, you forget about home. And therefore, you can't get home. So the forgetting part is noos, canceling of noos. And then the coming back home part is nostos. Mm. So to me, gee, it can be a simple formula. No noos, no nostos. Mm. Mm. There, I can say it in 4 words.
That's good.
Mixing English and Greek, but there it is. So I think, wow, that's really simple. If I wanted to start from scratch with people who are interested, let's not say in the Trojan War, but in verbal art about a shaman, that is to say, a wise person who passes out in the everyday world and whose mind then takes a trip to the other world, and then whose mind comes back. And that's one way to think of the Odyssey. It's a shamanistic journal. Is that a journey? Is that all right to think of it that way? Shaman, S-H-A-M-A-N, which is this Asiatic word for a wise person who does vision quests, mind travel. Then I would say the Lotus Eaters myth is a lovely way of saying, if you want to be a successful shaman, you better have your mind plugged in at all times. Otherwise, you'll never get back to your community.
And how about the aspect of eating within that myth, Greg? Is that significant, do you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, in Folklore 101, and you know, sometimes college students who take Folklore 101 or the equivalent know more than professors do about the Iliad, because there's some very, very, very basic things you can learn in folklore, in folkloristic studies, or try to study the myths of a wide variety of historically unrelated cultures. So if you study myth that way, then the idea of blanking out or being disconnected or being unplugged is one of the biggest universal themes about how then you get permanently lost and disoriented and you lose your identity. And after all, epic is so important for understanding identity. So in many ways, I think it is okay, although you can over-spiritualize this, to say that the Odyssey is a journey of a soul. By soul, I'll keep it as vague as possible. It's a mental journey.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
I really like the other story, the Song of the Sirens.
Oh my! Oh, it's wonderful. And you know, can I tell you can't play tricks with people who are part of our community, but if you talk to people about the Odyssey and you have only half an hour or 15 minutes, that's a really good one, because you can say, well, I'm sure you've heard the Song of the Sirens, and people say, yeah, we've all heard the Song of the Sirens, and I'll say, well, what did they sing? What did they promise to sing to Odysseus? And everybody thinks it's about sex, that it's going to be X-rated, and therefore it's a forbidden fruit, and that's what's dangerous about it. And sure, the sirens are sexy, but what are they promising to sing? Everything that happened in the world, especially what happened at Troy. In other words, we can sing the Iliad to you forever. The Iliad is inexhaustible. And so if Odysseus keeps on listening to the Iliad, oh, great. So it was I, Odysseus, who came up with the idea of the Trojan horse. Therefore, I get credit for the capture of Troy. Fine. But in the end, Iliad, which means the Song of Troy, is primarily not about Odysseus and his great feat. It's about Achilles. And Achilles failed where Odysseus succeeded, but Achilles already has an Iliad. That's a given in the Odyssey. It already has one. And so, the most dangerous thing for Odysseus is to be fixated on an earlier phase of his existence where he may have been a wonderful partner to Achilles. Well, in some ways he was, but in other ways, he will never have the primacy of place, the spotlight, the number one position of the story of Troy. It'll always be Achilles, even though Achilles failed.
So can I ask a question then? Does the I'm wondering about when Telemachus is sent off to find out about the Knossos of his father. Is there any danger for him in terms of being connected to his father's Kleos, right? Because there is this child-parent connection, child-father.
Yes. You know, that wonderful friend of ours, he tried to coax to come back and visit us on one of these office hours, Richard P. Martin, has an amazing article in a journal called Colby Quarterly. Everybody thinks it's Classical Quarterly, and they try to look it up in the library. Nobody can find it. So since nobody can find it, let me just quickly outline what he says, which is that Odysseus is really the last hero. And let's face it, the children of people like Odysseus, they still do things that are memorable, but they're no longer heroic the way the heroes of the Trojan War were heroic. So you can really say that Telemachus and all his friends are simply ancestors of the post-heroic generation. Did you notice, all of you, that this year I've started to say post-heroic, left and right? In previous years, I never said it. This is the first year. But I find that both the Iliad and the Odyssey are so insistent that what happened then was heroic age, and when we're listening to it now, it's post-heroic age. And people like Telemachus a very good example is Pisistratus, his sidekick in Odyssey 3 and 4. Those characters are really just the earliest examples of family trees that people trace themselves back to. I mean, it's so interesting that even in the case of the would-be royalty of Athens and then the city of Miletus, they trace themselves back not to Nestor, but to Pisistratus, the youngest son of Nestor. So history starts with the post-Odysseus generation. Can I say it that way? And they're not larger than life anymore. And especially Telemachus, he's so clueless most of the time. He's just there to be educated about the heroic age and then pass on the knowledge to us, the rest of post-historicity.
I think there is a danger for Telemachus, Claudia, to go off from your question as well. And in fact, I wrote a little blog post about it.
Yes.
Months ago or something.
The title is, let me plug it for Keith, Getting Over Odysseus, which is brilliant. But now that I've spoiled your headline, why don't you talk about what it was about?
It's just that Telemachus has to get to know the right Odysseus, the right version of his father.
Yeah.
He can't, just to summarize it very quickly, he can't become attached to the Iliadic version of Odysseus.
Yes.
Just like Odysseus can't spend time listening to the sirens tell the story of Troy. Telemachus has to get in touch with the
I love it.
Post-Iliad version of his father.
So get over
That's
it,
lovely.
Telemachus. Get over it. And
Lovely.
what's nice is, in the meantime, his name means he who fights at a distance, which matches Odysseus. So he's really named after the two primary heroic characteristics of the father in some traditions. One is that the father kills people with bow and arrow, as in the case of the suitors. And the other one that he was fighting a long ways away in Troy while the kid was growing up and having no ancestral patterning, and so that's why he's so clueless. So his name is an echo of the heroic age, but frankly, he doesn't live up to either of those requirements.
Well, it's about time for us to wrap this up, I think.
What a sad way to wrap it up. We got to get more cheerful about this. So,
Any more cheerful comments before we go?
Yeah, Sarah and Hélène, say something cheerful so that we don't end on this lugubrious note about the
Well, perhaps he is some sort of a bridge between us. We perhaps are not quite so close to the heroic age that we can, throw ourselves on the Sema, but he's perhaps that bridge between the heroic age and our age.
Nice, I like that. Now I'm laughing again.
Good. All right. So with that, I'll thank you all for joining us.
No laments, no laments.
For watching, and we'll be back next time.
And I'm so happy that Iliad and Sarah joined us. This has been, I think, 2 times even more fun than ever before. We always have fun, but you made it a lot more fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye for now.